Wait, before you scroll, before you tap away and tell yourself you've heard something like this before, just wait. Give me 30 seconds. Because what I'm about to say isn't motivational, it isn't polished, it isn't rehearsed. It's the thing I've never been able to say out loud without my throat tightening and my hands going cold. It's the truth about me, and maybe, if you're honest enough to stay, it's the truth about you too. I remember the exact night the floor gave way, not metaphorically. I rember it. I was sitting at my desk at 2:47 in the morning. I know the time because I checked it, as I always did, calculating how many hours of sleep I could still get if I stopped working that very second. The room was dark except for the blue-white glow of the screen. There were 3 empty coffee cups on the left side of the desk, 2 notebooks filled with handwriting so dense it looked like static, and a phone with 47 unread messages I had been ignoring for 6 days. I had just finished something, a project, something that mattered in the way I had trained myself to measure mattering, metrics, output, results. It was done. It was by any external standard excellent, and I felt nothing, not tired, not relieved, not proud, nothing. I sat there in that blue light and I waited for the feeling to come, the satisfaction, the exhale, the warmth I had promised myself would be on the other side of this particular wall, and it didn't come. I waited and waited, and the nothing just spread wider like water finding every crack and stone, until it filled the whole room, filled me, and I realized I had been building something for years, and I had built it on the wrong ground. Let me tell you what I built. I built a version of myself that could not be questioned. I built competence like armor. I built a reputation before I built a self. I built discipline before I understood what I was disciplining myself toward. I built walls and called them standards. I built distance and called it focus. I built speed, acceleration, forward motion, because if I was always moving, no one could look at me too closely, and more importantly, I couldn't look at myself. I built an empire of productivity in the wreckage of a childhood where love was conditional. That's the part I've never said out loud. Tell me something. Did someone teach you early that you had to earn it? Did someone, a parent, a teacher, a person whose approval you needed the way plants need sun? Did someone teach you that love comes after performance, that you are welcome when you are useful, that your presence alone is not enough, that you have to prove, achieve, produce, become something, be something, show something before you are worth keeping? Don't deny it. You know exactly what I'm describing. You can feel it right now, can't you? That low hum in the chest, that old architecture of, if I just do enough, then I will finally be safe. I lived inside that architecture for 30 years. I optimized my calendar. I woke at 5. I tracked macros, hydration, sleep cycles, readiness scores. I read books about systems and stoicism and the habits of people who had conquered something, their fear, their circumstances, their smaller selves. I took notes on the books and then took notes on the notes. I had spreadsheets inside spreadsheets. I had goals nested inside goals. And every morning I woke up and asked myself the same question before I even opened my eyes. What do I need to accomplish today to feel okay? Not happy, not alive, not connected. Okay, that was the ceiling. That was what I was working toward. Just okay. Just the temporary reprieve from the anxiety of not having done enough. Just the brief window between I have finished and I should already be starting the next thing. That was my life. And then she showed up. I want to be careful here, because this isn't a love story in the way you're thinking. This isn't the part where a woman saves a broken man and suddenly he sees color for the first time. That's not what happened. What happened was quieter and harder and more honest than that. She showed up in the ordinary way. She sat across from me at a dinner I hadn't wanted to attend. She had flour on her sleeve that she didn't know about, and I didn't tell her because I liked it, the imperfection of it, the realness. She laughed at something that wasn't particularly funny, a full laugh, uncontrolled, the kind of laugh that has no performance in it whatsoever, and I watched her and felt something strange. Not attraction, not yet. Something more like recognition. Like watching someone walk into a room without bracing themselves, without checking to see if the room approved. She was just there. I didn't know how to do that. Be just there. We started spending time together, and I noticed quickly that she did something I had no framework for. She paid attention. Not to what I was accomplishing, not to where I was going or what I was building, or how impressive the architecture of my ambitions appeared. She paid attention to me, the actual me, the one that existed when I wasn't performing. She noticed when I got quiet. She noticed when I answered a question without answering it. She noticed when I smiled in a way that didn't reach whatever is behind the eyes. She noticed without making me wrong for it. She didn't diagnose me or fix me or present me with a list of ways I could optimize my emotional health. She just said once, quietly, over coffee in the early morning, "You don't have to be impressive around me." 7 words, and I sat with those 7 words for 3 days because I realized I didn't know what I was if I wasn't impressive. I had been impressive for so long, it had stopped being something I did and had become something I was, or something I believed I had to be in order to justify taking up space. Here's what I learned. The thing I had been afraid of my entire adult life wasn't failure. It was being known, because failure I could survive. I had systems for failure. I had frameworks for setbacks and recovery protocols and a whole architecture of resilience I had built around the assumption that falling short was the primary danger. But being known, that was different. Being known meant letting someone see the version of you that exists before the performance begins. The version that is uncertain, the version that has fears that aren't logical and grief that has no clean resolution and longing that he doesn't fully understand. The version that sometimes lies in the dark at 3 a.m. asking the oldest human question, am I enough? Just as I am without anything attached, am I enough? I had never let anyone near that question because I had been taught, not in words, but in the language that children learn before they learn words, that the answer was no, that the answer was you are enough when you produce enough, when you achieve enough, when you become enough. But the undecorated you, the quiet you, the you without the accomplishments stacked around you like furniture, that version is risky. That version might not be kept, so I kept him hidden. I kept him buried under the calendars and the metrics and the relentless forward motion. And I called it drive, I called it ambition, I called it work ethic. And no one questioned it because the world rewards this. The world looks at a man who is always building, always moving, always producing, and calls him admirable. Calls him a role model, sends him articles about himself, shakes his hand at events. No one pulls you aside and says, but are you present? Are you here? Is there anyone home inside all that architecture? She asked me that once, not in those words. But one evening, after I had been talking for 20 minutes about something, a project, a strategy, a plan for the next phase of some plan, she put her hand on mine gently and she said, where are you right now? And I stopped. I looked at her, and I realized I had been physically in the room and entirely somewhere else. Somewhere 3 months in the future, mapping contingencies, stress testing scenarios, running the endless simulation of what could go wrong and how I would respond. I had not been present in that room with her for 20 minutes. I had not been present in most rooms with most people for most of my adult life. I had been there in body and gone in every way that matters. Look at me for a second. How many conversations have you had where you were already composing your response before the other person finished speaking? How many meals have you eaten while reading something else with your eyes? How many times has someone you love said something important and you heard the words but didn't receive them, didn't let them land because you were already 3 steps ahead in the logistics of your own mind? Don't deny it. You know this life. The life that is technically very full and somehow completely empty. The life that looks like success from the outside and feels like a very sophisticated kind of loneliness from the inside. I know it because I built it with my own hands. I thought I was building an empire. I was building a prison. Here's what I learned. This one took me a long time. The collapse was not the catastrophe. The collapse was the mercy. That night at the desk at 2:47 in the morning when I finished the thing and felt nothing, that wasn't rock bottom. That was the floor showing me where it was thin. That was something inside me, something I had been ignoring for decades, finally speaking in the only language left to it, absence, emptiness. The refusal to feel anything in a moment that should have felt like something. That emptiness was not my enemy. That emptiness was an invitation to stop, to sit still long enough to ask the questions I had been running from, to let the performance pause just for a moment and see what was underneath, to stop building for long enough to ask what I was actually building toward, and for whom, and whether any of it was bringing me closer to the life I actually wanted or just further from the life I was afraid to admit I didn't know how to live. She helped me understand this. Not by lecturing me, not by presenting me with a better system or a healthier framework, but by doing something revolutionary in its simplicity. She stayed when I was quiet. She stayed when I pushed back. She stayed when I got defensive. And I got defensive often in the early days because intimacy felt like exposure, and exposure felt like danger. And danger activated every armored response I had spent 30 years building. She stayed. And slowly, not quickly, not dramatically, not in a single revelatory moment, slowly I began to believe that it might be safe to be known. Here's what the rebuilding looked like. Not overnight transformation, not a retreat or a seminar or a moment of blinding clarity. The rebuilding looked like Tuesday morning. It looked like making coffee and, for the first time, not immediately picking up the phone. Just standing in the kitchen, just letting the light come through the window and being a person in a kitchen who notices light. The rebuilding looked like calling my friend back, the one I had been meaning to call for 4 months, the one whose messages I had been leaving on read because I was focused, because connection had been demoted to a luxury, something to be scheduled after all the important things were done. Not understanding that connection was the important thing. The rebuilding looked like sitting with her on the porch in the evening and not problem solving, not planning, not making the evening useful, just sitting, just being 2 people who were present in the same moment, letting the same silence hold them both. I thought I would feel restless. I did at first. The restlessness was enormous. My whole body was trained to move, to do, to produce. Sitting still felt like falling, like the floor was going to give way the moment I stopped moving. But I kept sitting, and slowly, the restlessness thinned, and underneath it, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I found something quiet, not emptiness, not the hollow, echoing nothing of that night at the desk. This was different. This was quiet, the way a room is quiet when the people in it feel safe. This was the quiet of a foundation, solid, load-bearing, real. I had never known that quiet before. I had been so busy building the upper floors that I had never stood on the ground. Music, full, present, neither triumphant nor sad, just honest. I built a life that looked like success. I thought success would feel like arrival. I thought I was building a home. I was building an altar to my own proving. Every achievement was a brick. Every metric hit. Every goal exceeded. Every room full of people who admired me. Each one was a brick I was laying on the altar of a question that was never going to be answered by bricks. Am I enough? You can't answer that question with accomplishment. You can't tile over it. You can't outrun it or outproduce it or optimize your way to the other side of it. I tried. I have 17 different colored tabs in a document that represents the evidence of how hard I tried. And it never worked. It never worked because the question isn't answered in the external world. It's answered in the quiet. It's answered when someone who knows the undecorated version of you, the version without the accomplishments stacked around it, the version that is uncertain and sometimes afraid and not always sure what it wants, when that person looks at you and doesn't look away, when that person says in words or in presence or just in the simple fact of staying you, just you are enough. She said that to me once, not in those words, but one morning, very early, before either of us had fully woken in that loose, half-conscious space where the performance hasn't started yet, I said something true, something I had never said to another person, something about the fear, about the specific, precise architectural fear of stopping and finding nothing underneath. And she didn't try to fix it. She didn't tell me the fear wasn't rational. She just moved closer. That was all. Just moved closer. And something in me, something that had been holding its breath for 30 years, exhaled. Here's what I want to tell you. Not as advice, not as a system, not as a framework with steps you can implement to optimize your emotional availability or your relational ROI or whatever language we're using to make vulnerability seem more manageable. Just as one person who collapsed and rebuilt, speaking to you right now, wherever you are, whatever you're carrying, one person to another, the thing you are running from is not as terrible as you've made it in your imagination. I know you've built a story around it, a story that says if you stop moving, the whole thing comes apart, a story that says if someone sees the real version of you, the undecorated, uncertain, sometimes afraid version, they will leave, or judge, or find you insufficient. A story that says your value is conditional on your production, that love is a transaction, that the only way to be safe is to be impressive. That story was written a long time ago. It was written by a child who was learning the rules of a room that may not have been a safe room, and you've been living by it ever since. But you are not that child in that room anymore. You are here. You have survived every hard thing that story was trying to protect you from. You have survived not being chosen, not being seen, not being enough in someone's eyes. You survived it. And you built all of this life, this competence, this fortress, out of the material of that survival, and it is remarkable. And it is not enough. Not because you are not enough, because a fortress is not a home. Tell me something. When did you last let someone sit with you in the quiet? Not entertain them, not impress them, not perform your intelligence or your insight or your suffering in a way that is still underneath a performance. When did you last let someone simply be with a version of you that isn't doing anything? When did you last let yourself be simply with that version? Because here's the thing about presence, real presence, the kind that actually feeds the soul. It doesn't require anything from you. It doesn't require accomplishment or output or results. It requires only that you are here, fully here. Not 3 steps ahead, not rehearsing, not building the next thing in the background while your body pretends to be still. Just here. And I know, that sounds simple enough to be suspicious. Because you've been trained to measure the value of a thing by how difficult it is, by how much it costs, by how much discipline and sacrifice and structure it demands. Presence costs a different currency. It costs the performance. It costs the image. It costs the carefully maintained impression that you have everything together, that you are always ahead, that nothing rattles you, that you are a person of impenetrable forward motion who does not need anything from anyone. That is what presence costs. And for a long time, I couldn't pay it. For a long time, the image felt like all I had. If I gave up the performance, what was left? Here's what I learned. What's left is everything. What's left is the actual you, the one that has been there the whole time, underneath all the architecture, patient and waiting, and this is the part that will surprise you. Not as broken as you've been telling yourself, not as insufficient, not as unworthy of being known, just a person, just a human being who got scared early and built walls and called them character, who learned to perform love because receiving it felt too dangerous, who made productivity a religion because emptiness felt like death and busyness felt like proof of existence, just a person. And when I finally let her see that, just the person, nothing else, she didn't leave, she didn't recoil, she didn't start cataloging my limitations or managing her expectations downward. She looked at me in a way I had never been looked at, and I realized this is what I was afraid of. Not that being known would destroy me, but that it might finally, after all this time, feel like being home. The rebuilding is not finished. I want to say that clearly so you don't take this as a story with a clean ending that makes the process seem shorter or easier than it is. The rebuilding is ongoing. Some mornings I still wake up and the old question is there before I've even opened my eyes. What do I need to accomplish today to feel okay? And I notice it now. That's the difference. I notice it and I don't immediately obey it. I lie there for a moment and I breathe and I choose, consciously, deliberately, daily, to add another question before I answer the first one. What do I want to feel today? What matters today? Who do I want to be today? Not what do I want to build, not what do I want to achieve. Who do I want to be? Some days the answers are boring. Some days being is very quiet and undramatic and does not feel like enough compared to the high of constant forward motion. Some days I sit on the porch and the light is very ordinary and I have not accomplished anything remarkable and I am deeply, strangely, unexpectedly at peace. Those days took a long time to arrive. They arrive more often now. And she is there on the porch. Not because she fixed me, not because she saved me, but because I finally learned to let someone stay. I finally stopped dismantling intimacy with my bare hands every time it came close. I finally believed, not all at once, but incrementally, morning by morning, small choice by small choice, that I was allowed to be known without being destroyed. That is the whole story. Not the achievement that changed everything, not the system, not the strategy, just the slow, daily, undramatic choice to be present, to let someone in, to sit still long enough to hear the quiet underneath, to rebuild not an empire, not an altar, not a fortress, a home. So here is where I leave you, not with a list, not with 5 steps, not with an exhortation to optimize your morning routine or quantify your self-worth differently or any of the other things we reach for when what we actually need is to sit still and feel the floor. I leave you here in this moment wherever you are. Maybe you are in a room full of accomplishments that feel hollow. Maybe you are in a relationship where you perform love because receiving it still feels like a trap. Maybe you are in a life that is technically functioning and somehow completely untrue. Maybe you are someone who is very good at a great many things, who has never once in their adult life let another human being fully see them. I am not here to tell you what to do with that. I'm only here to say, I know what it is to build a life that keeps everyone at a comfortable distance and call that distance strength. I know what it is to be surrounded by people who admire you and be completely, profoundly alone. I know what it is to be so disciplined in your productivity that you have accidentally become disciplined against your own joy. I know, and I want you to know that the collapse, if it's coming or if it already came or if it happened so quietly you barely noticed, the collapse is not the end of something. It is the beginning of the foundation, the real one, the one you build on ground instead of air, the one that holds not because you willed it to hold, but because it is true, because it is built from something real, something present, something honest. Look at me for a second. You don't have to keep running. The thing you've been running from, the emptiness, the fear of being insufficient, the terror of being fully seen and then left, it is not as bottomless as you've made it. I know it looks bottomless. I know it has looked bottomless for years. I spent decades not looking at it directly because I believed if I did, I would fall in and never come back. But I looked, and it wasn't bottomless. It was a question, am I enough? And the answer, the real answer, the one you cannot produce your way to, the one you cannot achieve or accomplish or optimize into existence, the answer is waiting in the quiet. It is waiting in the moment you stop moving long enough to receive it. It is waiting in the eyes of someone who knows you, actually knows you, and keeps choosing to stay. It is waiting in you. It has always been waiting in you. Come home.